We have now released issue 3 of the New Thinking Aloud magazine. Download it for free at newthinkingaloud.org. New Thinking Aloud is a non-profit endeavor. Your contributions to the New Thinking Aloud Foundation make a meaningful difference in our ability to produce new videos.
Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. Today we'll be exploring consciousness, conspiracies, and coincidence. With me is Robert Anton Wilson, author of Reality is What You Can Get Away With. Robert is a guerilla ontologist, a quantum psychologist, a novelist, and a stand-up comic. He's the author of some 26 books, including the classic Illuminatus trilogy, the Schrödinger's cat trilogy, and works of non-fiction, including The Cosmic Trigger, The Illuminati Papers, Prometheus Rising, Ishtar Rising, Coincidance, and of course, Reality is What You Can Get Away With. Welcome, Bob.
Great to be here.
It's a pleasure to be with you. You know, many people who have read your books, and I've had the same experience myself, have reported extraordinary coincidences and strange events occur to them just while reading your books. What do you make of that?
I must be channeling some higher power. I do. I get a lot of weird letters from people who do have strange experiences while reading my books. On the other hand, I get letters from people who tell me I'm possessed by demons and that I'm a charlatan. So I do get a variety of responses.
Well, it's as if you're tapping into something like a deep underlying archetypal structure of the universe in a funny way, a structure that has a sense of humor to it.
Well, I use a variety of literary techniques, including incorporating actual dreams into my works, my novels, my poetry, my plays, and films like Reality is What You Can Get Away With, and using cut-up in the Burroughs manner to get juxtapositions that the conscious mind couldn't conceive. And I consciously use mythic material. And of course, I've got a very bizarre sense of humor that puts things together in unusual ways. And on top of that, I write about subjects that traditionally invoke weird forces.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've even had quite a bit of experience with occult work yourself.
Yes, in around 1973, I became convinced for a while that I was receiving messages from outer space. But then a psychic reader told me I was actually channeling an ancient Chinese philosopher, and another psychic reader told me I was channeling a medieval Irish bard. And at that time I started reading neurology, and I decided it was just my right brain talking to my left brain. And then I went to Ireland and I found out it was actually a 6-foot-tall white rabbit. They call it the puka, and the Irish know all about it. So it depends on who I'm talking to, which of these metaphors I use to explain where these weird patterns come from that jump out of the books and take hold of the readers and change their lives. It's not me, it's a 6-foot-tall white rabbit from County Kerry. Or it's the right hemisphere of everybody's brain. Mm-hmm. We're only different in the left hemisphere. In the right hemisphere, we all share in the same morphogenetic field.
The collective unconscious.
And the collective unconscious.
Now, you've been accused by some people, one might think of them as fundamentalist materialists, as being something of a fanatic, actually. And yet it seems that you're almost the opposite. Reality is extremely slippery for you. I don't get the feeling that you're stuck on any one model of reality.
Well, you know what Freud wrote about projection. The people, I have been accused of being a fanatic in the Skeptical Inquirer, but you just have to open that journal to see the people who put it out are all fanatics. And the people who accuse me of being possessed by devils are all the type of right-wing fundamentalist who rolls around and speaks in tongues and gives all the signs of being possessed by the devil themselves. So I tend to look at, I think I basically I'm a mirror. My books are mirrors, and when a monkey looks in, no philosopher looks out.
Well, how do you separate the inside from the outside?
Well, that is one of the difficulties. That's why people get embroiled in weirdities while they're reading my books, because I'm dissolving the difference between the inside and the outside. Like most people think their head is inside the universe, but I have demonstrated in several of my books that the universe is inside our heads. Our head is outside the universe. This whole studio, for instance, it's got to be inside my head or I wouldn't be aware of it. I've got a model of it inside my head. Mm-hmm. Now, inside that model of the studio is a model of me, and on top of the model of me is a model of my head. But that's not my real head. My real head contains the studio and my body and this model of a head. And it's the same with the whole universe. The whole universe is a model contained in my head, which contains a model of my head. So I've got two heads, the head outside the universe and the head inside the universe. Now, that should be perfectly clear. But if it isn't, Bertrand Russell has a proof using six-dimensional geometry in his book, The Nature of Human Knowledge. I hope that clarifies which is inside and which is outside, and we don't have to get trapped in that again.
Well, one of the points that you often make is that we get caught up in these apparent paradoxes because of linguistic habits and a habit that we've had since the time of Aristotle of thinking in terms of syllogistic logic.
Well, yeah, I believe our language, we can only see what we observe, and we can only observe what we have categories for in our language. That's known as the Whorf hypothesis in anthropology. Actually, it goes back to Guillaume Battista Vico, an 18th century Neapolitan who has been a major influence on me as well as on James Joyce. And my books are full of neologisms and odd uses of language just to break through the habits of perception that are conditioned by using ordinary English. Mm-hmm.
You once wrote a whole book without using the verb is.
Yes, that's quantum psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I also break sentences up in the Burroughs way, so there's no subject and predicate. I use Joycean stream of consciousness. I run words together, so one word has 5 different meanings depending on which way you look at the sentence, like Joyce did in Finnegan's Wake. All of this is attempts to get us out of the lines of word and image that were laid down by our ancestors. After all, if we're seeing the world our ancestors put into our language, we're not seeing the world we're living in. It's obvious that our ancestors did not live with computers, spaceships, George Bush, and other incredible occurrences that are typical of our lives. Our ancestors, for instance, couldn't imagine Ross Perot, the deconstructionist candidate. Perot is the first candidate in history who doesn't have a policy on anything. He's a pure candidate. It used to be believed a candidate had to stand for some ideas or policies, and just like Derrida showed that a work is its own meaning and doesn't refer to anything outside of itself, Perot is a candidate who doesn't stand for anything. He's the pure Platonic abstract candidate. You fill in your own meaning. And our ancestors couldn't have imagined something like that.
So our ancestors lived in a very different, you use the term reality tunnel from the one in which we live.
Yes. Vico pointed out that all you have to do is sail from Italy to Spain and you'll find yourself in a different reality. And nowadays, all you have to do is cross from San Francisco to Marin and you're in a different reality.
Yeah. Well, how does conspiracy interrelate in your mind with consciousness, with coincidence? Those seem like such different realities, and you have a way of blending them.
Well, what I actually what I do is write about things that we're told not to think about. I have always had a resistance against banishing certain topics. When I was young, I couldn't understand why adults were trying to conceal sex all the time. Children weren't supposed to know about sex. I figured out a great deal of it on my own, and then spent a lot of time figuring out why are the adults trying to hide it. And as I got older and crazier, I wanted more and more about, I was told in school, you're not supposed to think about conspiracy. That's a sign of paranoia. So I started thinking about conspiracies. And you're not supposed to think about the paradoxes of consciousness. That's a sign that you smoke too much grass. Or you had a philosophy course. Somebody wrote a letter to Ann Landers once. My son wants to study philosophy. What can I do? He'll never be able to make a living. How can I persuade him to come back to consensus? I forget her exact words, but the idea is get him back to consensus reality so he'll become an insurance salesman or something practical. Mm-hmm. And so you shouldn't think about consciousness, and you shouldn't think about conspiracies, and coincidences are obviously meaningless. And so all of these ideas I have challenged just because I want to see what would happen if I did challenge them. And what happens is I get a lot of fascinating new ideas which make for very interesting novels, and for some interesting nonfiction books too, or what the charitable consider nonfiction books.
You're a member of an unusual religious organization, the Discordian Society.
Yes, I'm a pope, as a matter of fact. There are approximately 12 million Discordian popes now. Originally, Balaclips the Younger, the founder of Discordianism, had cards printed, and he'd just hand them out to everybody he met, making them popes. And then I printed the pope card in the Illuminatus trilogy, and the sociologist Margot Adler printed it in her book, Calling Down the Moon, which was a study of the revival of paganism in America. Mm-hmm. And so everybody who had those books, if they wanted to cut those cards out of the books, they could have had their own pope cards. But then I was living in Ireland, and the Pope came to Phoenix Park and announced, the guy who thinks he's the only Pope, he announced that bishops could give indulgences over television, which was a new thing in Catholic doctrine. And Dublin has the most erudite atheists in the world. What would you expect in a Catholic country? They were all educated by Jesuits, you know? So they started arguing in the letters columns of the papers. You have to have a license to own a television set in Ireland, and they want to know if you didn't pay your license fee, would the indulgence still work? And questions like that. And the best question was, if you make a videotape and play it over and over, do you get perpetual indulgence? And while the atheists and Jesuits were arguing over that, I got the idea, well, if they can do indulgences on television, I can do pontifications. And so instead of giving out cards, every time I got on radio or television, I made the whole audience popes. Which camera is on me right now, by the way?
I imagine it's the one you're looking at.
Okay, spectacles, testicles, brandy, cigars. Now everybody listening in is a Discordian pope. And the main rule is you excommunicate all other Discordian popes and you make up your own dogmas. That's the basic Discordian teaching. We Discordians must stick apart. So now I just made another million or so popes. Well, eventually we'll make every man, woman, and child on this planet a pope.
You seem to be getting at some kind of a philosophical principle, though. Discordianism speaks of discord as a cosmological principle, doesn't it?
Yeah, we anticipated chaos theory, but we were ahead of the mathematicians by about 20 years. Well, basically, there are two attitudes towards the universe, the accordion and the discordian. The accordion view is sort of represented by the Pentagon. We squeeze everything until we control it. And the discordian view is you let everything go its own way and see where it lands. And part of the Discordian philosophy is we need the accordions because without them we wouldn't have polkas, for one thing. And the other thing is we need the accordions because otherwise discord would have nothing to be discordant with. I mean, you need the IRS and the Pentagon, or there's nothing to rebel against. I'm in favor of Jerry Brown's flat tax, by the way. Almost everybody has been explaining in all the media why it's no good.
The flat 13%.
Yeah,
tax.
I don't care what percent. Well, I'd like it low, around 13, maybe even lower, 8% maybe if I'm lucky. But yeah, because I'm not an accountant. Most people I know are not accountants. Before you can go into an accountant, you've got to be an accountant yourself to get ready for your interview with the accountant. And so most of us spend our lives in continuous dread that we did something wrong and the government's going to catch up with us. And I think that is the main cause of angst, insanity, schizophrenia, psychosomatic symptoms, sociopathic aberrations, and most of the problems in our society is this goddamn complicated income tax form. Flat tax would simplify everything, only I don't think Jerry Brown goes far enough. He's not running for president, he's running for Jedi Knight. What I'm running for is emperor, and I think what we need is a revival of feudalism. You just let them come around once a year. They walk into your house and they say, we'll take the car, we'll take the computer, we'll take the VCR, whatever, you know, they take whatever they think they can get away with. And then it's up to you to figure out how soon you can get a new car, how soon you can get a new computer, and so on. This is the way, you know, in the Middle Ages when they took all your cattle and half of your pigs, it was hard, but you didn't have this continuous worry that they were going to come back and say you didn't fill out the form right. You know they're thieves, they admit they're thieves, it's an honest relationship, just like the Mafia. I love the Mafia compared to the government. Now, if the Mafia wanted to get Saddam Hussein, they'd put out a contract and Saddam Hussein would bite the dust pretty quick. George Bush goes blundering around and kills 200,000 innocent bystanders and Saddam Hussein is still there. He's got a job, but most Americans don't. That's no way to run a country. Let the Mafia run the country. Let the Mafia, if they want to knock somebody off, they'll knock them off without blowing up lots of women and children and innocent bystanders and dogs and cats.
Well, a lot of your research into conspiracies suggests that the Mafia has been running things for a long time anyway.
Trying to. No, most conspiracy theorists look for the one group that runs everything, but I long ago rejected that view because, well, there are basically three ways of looking at the universe. Atheism, monotheism, and polytheism. Atheism says nobody's in charge, it all happened by accident. That's the orthodox view of history. It all happened by accident. Then there's the polytheist, the monotheistic view, which is there's one overriding intelligence. That's what most of the conspiracy buffs believe. It's all the Bavarian Illuminati, or it's the Jesuits, or it's the Elders of Zion, or the Freemasons, or the bankers, or somebody or other, is really running everything. And I figure if that were true, the universe would make sense, and it obviously doesn't. So I take the polytheistic view. There are conflicting groups of powers fighting over this planet. And that makes sense. You look around, what do you see? Chaos, discord, confusion, bureaucracy, and international relations, all of which are different names for various levels of conflict between unenlightened beings struggling over imaginary goals.
Now, the Discordian society pays homage to the goddess Eris.
Yes, the Discordian explanation of the existence of evil in the universe, which bothers all religions. The Buddhists try to get out of it by saying it's only an illusion. That's pretty hard to believe when you got a toothache, or when the doctor says you got 6 months to live with that cancer there, you know. Others try to explain how God didn't intend to create evil, it just sort of happened while he wasn't paying attention. The Discordian explanation is the original snub. They were having a party on Olympus and they didn't invite Eris, so she threw in a golden apple, which said on it to the prettiest one. And all the goddesses got fighting over who was the prettiest one. Hermes tried to claim it too. You know about Hermes. And
the hermaphroditic god. Huh?
Yeah. And so they let Paris judge. They figured a mortal would be the best one to judge. And all the goddesses tried to bribe him, and Athena offered him wisdom, and I forget what the others offered right now, except Aphrodite offered him Helen, the wife of Menelaus, and he took one look at her and he says, "I'll take the girl." Yeah, he was a healthy young Trojan. So he grabbed her and dragged her off to Troy, and that led to the war between the Greeks and the Trojans. And I don't know why it is we got a condom named after the Trojans, but we don't have one named after the Greeks. It's one of those mysteries I've never figured out. But ever since then, because of the original snub, we've had chaos, discord, confusion, bureaucracy, and international relations.
So throughout mythology even, the goddess Eris has never had enough attention until the Discordian Society attempted to put things right.
Yes, I think... well, I already explained the case for polytheism, and you got to include one deity who's absolutely crazy, or it still doesn't work. And Eris is obviously the craziest goddess that anybody ever imagined. So she's the controlling divinity on this planet at this time. Well, this planet would begin to make some sense. Since it doesn't begin to make any sense, we Discordians just say "Hail Eris" every time we see a conspicuous example of chaos, confusion, idiocy, and general entropy and chaos and general breakdown.
What about synchronicity? How does that fit into your model?
Synchronicity is the clue that maybe there is an intelligence at least equal to Eris that may be working to establish order. But synchronicity may mean that Eris just has a weird sense of humor. Every Discordian pope decides that for herself or himself, because no two Discordian popes ever agree entirely on the Discordian revelation. Malaclips got his Discordian revelation from a talking chimpanzee in a bowling alley in Yorba Belinda. Most of us get it by activating a pineal gland. Most people have a lopsided pineal gland. But if you repeat the Discordian affirmation often enough, your pineal gland stops being lopsided and you get your own revelation from Eris. The affirmation is, all affirmations are true in some sense, false in some sense, meaningless in some sense, true and false in some sense, true and meaningless in some sense, false and meaningless in some sense, and true and false and meaningless in some sense. And if you repeat this 666 times, you will achieve supreme enlightenment in some sense.
That's a mind.
Well, thank you very much.
I'm still trying to follow that.
Well, sometimes I go a little too fast. I'll try to slow down. The Discordian and Accordian contrast, it appears in Taoism as the yin and the yang. In the Church of the Subgenius, it's the balance between something and nothing that holds the universe together.
And in the Discordian Society, it's the sacred cow, isn't it?
Yeah, the accordion and the Discordian. Well, the Hodge and the Podge. Yes.
Now, you're an expert on cults, as a matter of fact. It's one of the great fascinations that you've had is weird religions. And you mentioned one a moment ago, the Church of the Subgenius.
Yes, I'm not only fascinated by weird religions, I've helped create several of them. I was an inspiration on the Church of the Subgenius. Bob is partially named after me, I've been told. J.R. Bob Dobbs, the Saint of Sales, epopt of the Illuminati and living slackmaster. He's the patron of the Subgenius Church. He's named after me, I've been told, in part. I also, there's a lot of new religions that I've done my share to popularize, because I think we need religion desperately. If you look around the world, it's obvious people don't know where to put their shoes at night. They're confused about almost everything. I like the Church of Fred Mertz, Bodhisattva.
The Church of Fred Mertz, Bodhisattva, from I Love Lucy.
Yeah, this church is based on the teaching that if you look at I Love Lucy reruns and pay close enough attention, eventually you'll see that Fred Mertz speaks all the wisdom of the universe.
Well, the idea of the Bodhisattva is the Buddhist concept of the enlightened teachers who come back to spread enlightenment to every sentient being.
Yeah, well, of course, this includes lice and bed bugs and microbes, you know, and Buddha's teaching every sentient being. So it's got to include the couch potatoes who do nothing but look at I Love Lucy reruns. They can't be ignored. And Fred Mertz is the Buddha for those people. If you listen closely enough, you'll see Fred is giving all the Dharma teachings.
Well, for example?
Well, there was one Zen master who, no matter what he was asked, said quartz. And often Zen students are told to meditate on quartz until they understand it. You can meditate on one of Fred's monosyllables like, huh? If you meditate, you know, there's also the Zen mu. You can meditate on Fred's huh instead of either quartz or mu. And eventually, if you get to the center of huh, you will have perfect slack, just as if you had been in the Church of the Subgenius, and all things will then fall into place. You'll be balanced between something and nothing.
That's what slack is.
When you're balanced between something and nothing, and then you can get something for nothing, which is what we all want, isn't it?
So what are some of the other great wisdom teachings of Fred Mertz?
Well, look at the reruns and see for yourself. I'd rather discuss the toad elevating moment, which is one of the great Discordian revelations. If you eat a live toad the first thing in the morning, nothing worse will happen to you all day long. Now, in a world like this, that's worth considering. Do you know what George Bush said at Auschwitz? No. Boy, they were really into crematoriums, weren't they? Now, he's one of the most profound statements I ever heard from a Republican. That ranks right next to Dan Quayle's remark at the East Bay Bridge after the earthquake. It looks like the top part fell on the bottom part. And that ranks also right next to Richard Nixon's remark at the Great Wall of China. This is indeed a great wall. You can't beat the Republicans for keen observation.
It seems to me I can recall Fred Mertz kind of saying, gosh, I could never figure out women.
The total confession of the intellectual bankruptcy of patriarchy. Yes.
It's quite profound in a way. 6,000 years of culture boiled into one statement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you're in the right state of mind, you can find all the wisdom. Well, I already said that. It's all in Fred Mertz.
It's all in everything, seems to be what you're saying, ultimately.
That's right. If you open your eyes, infinity is in a grain of sand. William Blake, whose real name was O'Neill, but I don't think I'll get into any of this Irish chauvinism. I already did the puka. That's enough Irish for one.
The 6-foot-tall rabbit that haunts County Kerry.
Yeah, he hangs around pubs.
Robert Anton Wilson, it's been a gas spending this time with you. And for those of our viewers who have enjoyed our interview, you may be interested in knowing that an additional hour going into greater depth with Robert Anton Wilson will be available as part of the Thinking Aloud Inner Work series on videotape. Bob, thanks again.
Oh, it was a lot of fun.
And thank you for being with us.
I imagine that by now many of you already realize that, in conjunction with White Crow Books, we've just launched the new Thinking Aloud Dialogues book imprint, and our first title is There Life After Death? New Thinking Aloud is a non-profit endeavor. Your contributions to the New Thinking Aloud Foundation make a meaningful difference in our ability to produce new videos.